Welcome, Kirstin Bunting. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of your afternoon with us and for sharing your love of space education. For our audience, just remind us who you are and how you came to get involved in space.
All right. My name's Kirstin Bunting. I am currently a teacher at Roosevelt Elementary in Cocoa Beach. So we literally get to watch rocket launches from the playground, and it's beautiful. I actually grew up in Illinois and lived there for most of my life. I only moved to Florida about 8 years ago, but ever since I was a little girl, I knew I was going to move to Florida, and I always told my dad I'm going to work for Kennedy Space Center, which hasn't happened yet, but we're working on it. I've At 2 years old, I was able to tell my parents every planet in order, front to back, and just loved anything and everything that had to do with space. And so it has become my passion to teach and as well share my love for space with children and adults alike.
So little people, kindergartners, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, they're naturally inquisitive. Like I always describe them as like little puppies. They're so exuberant and excited to learn. How are you able to kind of harness that excitement and then apply it to what could be considered like, higher level concepts for kids of that age?
Absolutely. I always look at it as through the eyes of a child. They see everything with wonder, and it's magical. And it's definitely difficult to explain a lot of things to them because there are things they don't understand. But when you make it fun and engaging and really break it down to their level, it makes them excited too. For example, I have my boyfriend come and speak to my class every year, and I let them just ask questions. I sit down and they either write the question themselves or I scribe it for them, and they ask the cutest and funniest questions.
Now he works for Kennedy Space Center, is that right? So he comes to your class to talk. Is he an engineer? Is that what he's talking with them about?
Yes, he is a mechanical engineer. So they obviously think everybody at NASA is an astronaut. So they ask him questions like he is an astronaut. And he knows quite a few of the answers as well, just because of the people that we get to meet and interact with. But they just see everything with wonder, and inquiry is just a huge part of our classroom. That's the helm of my classroom is inquiry, letting them ask questions, letting them explore, and giving them the tools to do so. One of my favorite questions that they ever asked him was, have you ever been in a crater? Thinking of,
they know, cute. Yeah.
We study the sky and the objects in the sky, and they know that the moon has craters. So they thought, he's an astronaut, so he's been to the moon, and he hasn't. But it blew their mind because he told them, actually, I have been in a crater because of the craters in Arizona and things like that. So they've definitely learned a lot.
Wow. What would you say is your favorite space memory? And then later on, we'll ask you about your favorite teaching space memory. And they may or may not be the same.
Absolutely. My favorite space memory was getting to be a part of, that's a tough one. I would say getting to be a part of the Artemis 1 launch. I got to be there for the third launch attempt. The rocket actually went off, and I actually got to help escort ESA employees at the Space Center, which was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that, and it was so neat to be able to take part in history being made.
Right. I don't know if Americans understand what good diplomacy that NASA has been with our partners like the European Space Agency, because we built the space station with them, and even as bad as things are with us and the Russians right now, we still have Americans and Russians working side by side in the ISS. So that had to be fun. Were you able to have a conversation with these the visitors, or
I was, yes.
What was that like?
They were all so excited and just so happy to be there, and happy to just finally see it go, because some of them had been there coming since the first attempt. So
right,
waiting and the anticipation was.
Am I right in that the Europeans built like the service module for the Orion? They actually contributed to the SLS. Is that correct?
They did, yes. That is correct.
So is your favorite teaching memory the same, or is it a different one? Let's just go straight there. Like with work, because I can only imagine these little kids and what they're talking about.
My favorite teaching memory is actually, it has some to do with space, but in a roundabout way. I have a little boy in my classroom who came in to my room with some behavior challenges, and I learned that he was obsessed with space, especially NASA and SpaceX. So I ended up creating him a behavior chart out of SLS. I took the SLS, cut it into 5 pieces, and he earned what we now call his rocket pieces all throughout the day, and then he would get a prize at the end of the day. And that turned into a whole like behavior management system for him. I actually ended up having some of my friends from NASA create a video about what it's like to work at NASA and the skills, the social emotional skills you need to be able to work in a stressful environment, especially when it comes to launching rockets, which is what he's crazy about. As a matter of fact, today he came to school literally spinning and yelling, "It's Starship launch day, it's Starship launch day," over and over again, so excited. And when I told him that they scrubbed, he cried. So it was so, it's very special to see such young people so excited about space.
I would imagine that sounds like in your classroom, you could even broadcast that launch live. Is that something that you would have the flexibility to do?
Absolutely.
I'm still like just impressed. First of all, like the idea that obviously we know you have to have behavioral management systems and that there are little things you can do with younger level students, but that was really quick of you to take his passion and relate it to a same way, like, okay, there are consequences. So
Right.
I can almost envision now this becomes a marketable product that you can kind of like, themed, almost like, themed behavioral management things where you have these little kits out and teachers pay teachers or whatever, where somebody can download that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, when you said that, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the next iteration as this child gets older, you could make him a go, no go checklist for launch. Like his goal is to get to launch, and you could check him off during the day, something similar to what you're already doing. He would probably really respond to something like that.
Well, I'm also thinking too, you said that they then created a video saying like, we have to behave or act a certain way in order to be this. So he's going to start to associate, okay, if this is where I see myself in a career, then I have to adjust and kind of become that now. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. It is funny that you say that too, because at the end of every day, he comes up and goes, "Miss Bunting, go or no go?" And he knows if it's no go, that means he doesn't get his reward for the end of the day. But if it's go, he gets his prize. So
right.
That's fantastic. Are you able, well, do you do field trips to KSC with them that young? Is that something, what is that like? Because I've worked almost my entire life, or I'm sorry, for 20 plus years, it's been middle school, high school for me. So I don't have a lot of wheelhouse, it's not my place. Tell me what it's like with the really younger students.
That was actually our first field trip of the year. And they were so excited and had so much fun. And we go out to the Astronaut Memorial Foundation Education Center, and they put on a wonderful presentation for us that really dove into the different parts of Artemis and what they do, and provided a craft activity where they took the parts of Artemis and talked about them and glued them down where they needed to go. And then we also got to do all the fun stuff too. Of course, they loved Planet Play and all of that kind of stuff too. So,
are they old enough to ride the little Atlantis simulator? Are they old enough, tall enough for that?
I would say I have a few that are tall enough. That was not open to us while we were there, though.
Got it.
I just learned about that play area. We were just there on over the weekend with 6th graders. And they're like, here's what we really want to go with the plays or the whatever it was. And I was like, what are you even talking about? I had no idea that apparently the bigger kids love that place as well.
And that used to be a different, they've modified that. That was like a theater and some, that building has changed recently with the addition of Gateway, right? The Gateway building is entirely new. So 8 years, huh? How many times have you visited KSC in 8 years?
Funny thing is, I did not visit KSC until about 3 years after I moved to Florida. I lived on the Space Coast for 2 whole years before I even visited KSC.
Wow, that's funny.
Um,
You're right there. That's
yeah.
hysterical. Well, I want
So,
to ask a little bit about, so continuing into your classroom, right? So what are the biggest challenges that you have with kindergartners? And these, are you doing experiments? Are you teaching like, so what's the biggest challenge with that age group in space or science?
we do a lot of project-based learning, and the biggest challenge there is the social emotional skills. At that age, they're still really developing and learning those problem solving skills socially and in general. So it's helping them learn to navigate challenges, especially at the beginning of the year. So many of them just say, oh, this doesn't work. I give up. I'm not doing it. It's too hard. And there's lots of tears. But as we progress throughout the year, they build more confidence and realize, oh, I can do this. I just have to maybe try it a different way, or maybe even ask for help. And at one point, I was teaching 5th grade. And one of the most profound things that a 5th grader has ever said to me in regards to STEM education was, it is, let's see, what was it? STEM education has taught me that not everyone is good at everything, but that everyone is good at something. And when we all work together, we can solve big problems. And that has become my goal, to teach every age that is a valuable solution to have in life.
Well, speaking of every age, let's transition a little bit into the work that you're doing for professional development. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I am currently working on my master's degree in instructional design and technology. And through my coursework, I've created a 5-module course for educators that covers what STEM education is, why it's valuable, what STEM education looks like in the classroom with hands-on experiences. So basically, myself or another instructor would be doing a STEM or STEAM activity with them, and then also giving them the chance to see how STEM or STEAM connects across the curriculum, as well as providing them with an opportunity to collaborate with their peers and create a basically a map of their entire school year and the different standards that they cover and how they can work a STEAM curriculum into that.
So you're helping them to plan in advance instead of trying to like grapple at the last minute to get it together. So do you do it from like a backwards planning, or like where you're kind of starting at the end in mind and then working the way back into, or does it work in quarters? Is that like we do in middle and high school?
Yeah, it's mostly by quarter.
So as part of your graduation course, you're creating these components. Are you going to put them on a site like a Thinkific or a Udemy, or like how would a teacher access those courses?
Yes, currently working on a website for those.
So you're working a side hustle already.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Do you have a name for your company?
I do not yet. That is still in the works.
Well, I think, the coaching realm has really taken a hold. And so there's always a need for people who figured out how to do something well to teach those who are just now coming in the industry. So I think it's important for like new teachers. There's always, it's always hard to retain new teachers just because teaching in general can be stressful. And when you're brand new, you're just learning, you're already like, unless you have a mentor, you're already, kind of out of sorts. So it's almost like you're coaching a teacher, an educational coach, particularly with STEM. So a STEM coach.
And I'd like to add to that. I think it also, sometimes there are good teachers that simply don't have the time to get some of the content or an activity or an experience that they want something, and they know that thing when they see it, but it just would take so long for them to create it on their own. It's easier to say, that's a great activity for my class. I'm going to use that.
Well, make sure you make a Teachers Pay Teachers store. That's something I am late to the game in doing, but as I listen to other podcasts that are also entrepreneurial for like educators or edupreneurs as they were, I always think, if I had only done this like 7 years ago, then, if you have your teacher store, then you can use your website to obviously sell things like your behavioral modification rockets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think I'm still like reeling about them. I think that's fantastic. Well, when you're dealing with adults, have you actually worked with any of them yet for the PD, or is it you just creating the classes?
I have not actually worked with any yet. I'm still working on creating the classes, and it's looking like I'm also going to be blessed with the opportunity to go to the space conference put on by the Astronaut Memorial Foundation, which is the Spaceport Area Conference for Educators. And my administration seemed to be really excited about that. And
is that July, right? It's a summer. Is it a summer?
In June.
June, yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure we will also invite you to, I'm sure Kevin usually waits to the end, but like, this is a great opportunity.
Yes,
There's
well,
an education conference that we do too.
So yes, we, I was taking students to Small Sat Conference in Utah, but that's hard to get to. And we're like, hey, we're near the Space Coast. So last year, an engineer from Jacobs, whose name was also Kevin and I,
Yeah, his name is not Kevin and
we organized the Small Sat Education Conference. And our, and it was last year we were free. It was free for students and educators. So we want teachers to come to get equipped and get inspired and get some things that they can take back with them, especially related to high altitude balloons, thin sats and CubeSats. So in fact, I have plans on my kids, let's say my aerospace club builds rockets. Well, we're going to take the kindergarten kids out into the field and let them actually push the button to launch the rockets. We think that the kindergarten kids will get a big kick out of that. So
they absolutely would.
Yeah, and I'm throwing out the invite to you that you're welcome to, please share with your network and please come and attend our conference in the fall.
And there's opportunities to present too. And I'm sure that like this is an important field. I think we wait too long, especially in American education, to recognize the value of these STEM careers until they're in, say, high school or college. When really we should be tapping the interest of them in kindergartner. Like those are the young kids who don't know that they can't do these big things. They're super excited about being it, but we need to have more elementary teachers and to kind of change that thought process about how we view these young kids.
For sure. And the beauty of STEM education is it can help them be successful no matter their career, because it does teach them those valuable social skills and problem solving and collaboration.
Right.
Well, my role, for example, I'm actually an English teacher and debate coach. So I'm not even STEMmy, right? But when I started working with Kevin, we were sharing some of the same students and they were talking about CubeSats and I didn't know what they were, but I was like, they were going out into the community and talking about them. So I figured I can help them prepare to speak on the content. So what I learned very quickly after working with his kids and together was that in any industry, and so we focus on the aerospace industry, there's a job for everyone. It doesn't matter what it is. So, okay, I'm a debate coach. So there's space law, or I'm an artist. I can design mission patches. And I think that we forget that most people only think, oh, you're an astronaut or you're an engineer if you're in aerospace.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially growing up in Illinois, when I first moved here, I thought I'd pigeonholed myself almost like, oh, I'm going to be a teacher for the rest of my life. And, teaching isn't the best climate right now. No, I still love it and enjoy it. And I didn't think there was ever going to be a position for me at NASA, but now I know there is. And I've known that for quite a while now, but it definitely, it's great to know that you can encourage any student to chase their dreams, no matter what they study.
Are you, and I just saw recently there were postings for the ISS National Labs. I think they were looking for some educator folks. So do you know, if you're not aware, when we're done with our interview, I'm glad to share with you the names of the folks that I know that, and perhaps you already know them. Space may be almost infinite, but folks in aerospace that's a very close community. So we tend to get to know each other. I can tell you based on some research that Shauna did for a presentation, that I remember in her literature search, she shared that students as young as 5 or 6 can form a STEM identity.
Well, it's Erickson and Piaget, right? That whole educational pedagogy about when we form who we are, that identity happens.
And as a coach, right, somebody who has coached sports teams for 2 decades in athletics, if a young person can't see themselves doing it, it's very hard for them to achieve it, right? So that's partly it's about visualizing what you want. You're in sort of like down the road where you want to be. And the older I get, I see that maybe the path isn't such a straight line, but you've got to have a vision of where you want to be headed, down the line. I guess you get to be at the front end of that vision building, with these kids. So I imagine on the Space Coast, do a lot of kindergarten kids want to work at NASA? Is that something that they identify easily to, like the meatball logo and the
Yeah,
worm logo?
they do. I have quite a few that want to, but I also have the little girls that want to be princesses and the boys that want to be race car drivers and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely quite a few that want to be astronauts or even engineers. So
Oh, that's so
Do you have a lot of, is your school located in a place where you get like employees, kids, like
yes,
folks that work on okay, so that nut is not falling far from the tree, right?
absolutely.
Because they probably see it in their daily lives. So
I have one more question about your curriculum too. And I was thinking, and I know you haven't actually worked with the adults yet, but you are one and you have colleagues. What do you imagine so we asked about the challenges for the little people. How different do you think it will be? How different do you think it will be to actually have to entertain or educate an adult population versus your kindergartners?
It's funny that you asked that. I feel like so often any PD session is much like teaching any grade. You'll have teachers that are disengaged, disinterested. They don't want to be there. They just want to go home. But it's all about making it fun and hands-on. And one thing I love about STEM education is it creates an opportunity for students to own their learning and really connect with it. And I feel like that would be the same thing for educators. There's a phrase that we throw a lot around in education that is buy-in. They need buy-in. And I feel like once educators understand what STEM is, why it's important, and how it can transform their classroom, they will have the buy-in.
Yeah. Well, just for the sake of time, we always love to end with that question to inspire either the teachers who might be listening, who might be thinking, how do I bring space down to this level? There's no way it can be done. Or even for parents out there who might have really young minds that they might want to encourage. So what advice do you have for our listeners?
Reading is so important. There's so many great books out there about astronauts and engineers, especially women astronauts and women engineers, that can help spark those ideas and dreams for your children.
That's really good. Yeah, I think when I think to any experience that I had with space, one of the things that I always notice when you ask Kevin, like what was their earliest memories of it, most people mention a parent, right? Or the idea of some parent engaged. Like for me, it was my father pointing up at the stars, and we would walk and he'd say, look at the stars. But I also read a lot, and because there's no way I was ever going to go up into space. I was in like the thriving metropolis of Homosassa Springs, Florida, right? Like nobody knows where that is. So, but I would read stories, and whether it was A Wrinkle in Time or any other sci-fi that would take me beyond that, so I could at least imagine. And it really opened up worlds. And in this case, obviously, the next world that we might have.
Absolutely.
Well, Kirstin, I want to thank you for being with us. And I actually am really looking forward to hearing and where you're going to land on the next phase of your career, because I know you're in preparation now, right?
Sounds like NASA education to me.
We're always preparing. And I'll just throw out a name, Cindy Hasselbrink. She's in NASA headquarters. If you haven't met her yet, maybe find a way to connect with her. She's in the education office there at NASA. But hopefully she'll see or hear this pod or podcast. And we wish you the best of success, and we look forward to just hearing about really great things that are going to go on in the near future.
And I'm thinking maybe since we're so close, there might be a way to collaborate with her kids, even via like a Zoom, or at some point like your aerospace kids. Even if we do it for next year, we can come up and visit, and they could do an activity with our kids.
That's right.
Fun.
My lab is right next door to the kindergarten class, and we have glass walls. It is very, I invite the kindergarten over, and my middle school kids will do demonstrations for the kindergartens. I don't know which group of kids enjoys it the most, the little ones, or the middle school, but we can definitely find ways to collaborate, because I believe, like you do, that STEM is vital. And if, these educators, if they just understand how we can collaborate, get like minds together, we can have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful.
We appreciate you spending your time with us today. We look forward to talking to you again.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks.